You have it. Yes.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening. It's about time we got back here.
Yeah, we're back. Uh, it's warmer. Schedule slowed down a smidge. Basketball season's busy. It's a busy time of year. Uh, just is.
And
5 days.
you have nothing else to do but track.
5 days a week. Yep. Track. Uh, it doesn't feel as pressing, but now from March 28th until April 28th, I have 10 junior high and high school track meets. Now, two of those meets that we have are junior high and high school together, so that's not bad. But yeah, it's this is the calm before the press, but it's a pretty good rhythm, and I get to control when those games are played or when they're competed in and not as the head coach. So we don't do anything on Wednesdays ever, and we do specific things on Wednesdays that are shorter than it is normally the rest of the week. So I'm usually home a little earlier on Wednesdays.
Yeah, but we got you covered.
Yeah. Uh, so we get a little bit more space. I moved back out of a classroom. Like since Christmas, I've had a math class that I've been responsible for. I say a math class, a classroom with 4 math subjects taught, like 4 sections of math taught. So it's been different too. But I was covering for a lady who was on maternity leave who came back Monday. So the last couple days have been a good deep breath and back into kind of my normal role. And it should be this way until about the second week of April, and then I'll take over another lady's math class who's stepping out to have a baby. So cover that the rest of the year and
I'm not going to comment.
figure out what to do from there. Did you and I talk about this? The almost every woman who works for the school who has been pregnant or is currently pregnant is having a girl. Yeah. Every every woman who works at the school right now that either has recently had a baby, by recently mean like this school year, or is going to have a baby, they're all girls. All the babies are girls. So
Must be the water.
yeah. So welcome back. We're gonna eventually get into the beginning of chapter 22. I want to do a quick flyover of chapter 21 because we uh, didn't get to do it together, but here we are. Um, Matthew 21 kicks off with the triumphal entry. Talked a lot about that.
Yep.
Connections to it. Habakkuk being one of them, right? So Habakkuk. Pretty sure it's Habakkuk. Anyway, um, Jesus was come strolling in, and he was riding a donkey.
That's what it says.
It's political theater, a lot of that, right?
Well, yeah. Well, the significance we talked about was Jesus was coming from the east,
Yes.
and the cohort or the whatever the
Yeah, the Roman legion.
Roman troops, legion, were coming from the west.
Yep.
Which is very significant.
A lot of pomp and circumstance
right,
in that thing.
Yeah, to show
conquering and might and force.
Right. And we know that in the end times, it's significant that Jesus will appear in the east.
Yeah.
You know, and whatever power in the west that may show up is significant at that time.
And this division east and west that was going to be start from that mount and split. Mount of Zion was going to split east and west.
Right.
Uh, anyway, uh, lots of stuff going on there. When he makes his way into town, the book of Luke says that he weeps, right?
Right.
Because he was coming to bring peace. They didn't want peace.
Well, certain factions of the town were looking for a new king, a triumphal entry of a king
Yeah.
who would come in might and power and to get rid of the
Yeah.
oppressors.
Mm-hmm.
And that wasn't Jesus's mission.
Right.
Had not been from the very beginning.
Yes.
And so that factions were bitter. They
Right.
were upset. And then you had other people who were saying, well, why is he even here? But then the significance of coming in at Passover was,
Yeah.
yeah,
And they start shaking palm fronds,
right,
which are associated with Sukkot. But this time, they had their palm fronds ready.
right,
And that palm frond wasn't about Sukkot. It was about the zealot movement, right?
right.
It's really their calling card and celebration. So he ends up getting to the top of the Temple Mount and makes his way into the temple and does what?
Well, in we talked about this a great deal
Yes.
while we weren't online, but this is, and we've discovered through reading,
Yeah.
that this is the first cleansing of the temple where he
This is the first one?
yes,
The first one's in John, right?
right,
And then this would be the
second,
John puts
okay.
it much earlier in
Yeah,
his ministry,
well,
right?
he's already cleaned it once. The second cleaning the temple has a lot of significance going back to the time when, by Jewish law,
Yeah.
the second cleansing of a domicile
Yes.
meant that if you still had mold in the
Yes.
house, goes back to the getting rid of the leaven in your
Yes.
house.
11.
That if you find mold the second time,
Yeah.
that the law says you're supposed to tear the entire house down
Yes.
and build anew. Very
And-
significant in the fact that this is the second cleansing
Yes.
of the temple, where he
Yeah.
drives out the money changers, he turns over tables, he really disrupts the whole
Yeah.
theme of how the temple had changed.
And he replaces that with miracles and signs and wonders, and then he goes on back to the place where he's camping. And the next morning he's on his way back into town. And he curses a fig tree.
Right. And his disciples ask him why.
Yeah, why? I mean, that fig tree really died quick. How can that be?
Yes.
Because the fig is about the knowledge of the gospel, right? It's the sweetest of the fruit. So it's about the truth of the gospel, the truth of the Old Testament, the truth of the law being taught by men. And well, people their position was people aren't actually doing this work the way that they claim to be.
Yeah, they're not. Well, he says if it doesn't bear fruit, then you get rid of it.
Yeah.
And bearing fruit means that you're doing the work of the Lord. You're actually following what the Lord has said about taking care of the orphans and widows and the sojourners. And it goes all the way back to the very beginning of how they started studying
Yes.
the faith.
And he says, well, if you had faith the size of a mustard seed, that you too could say to this mountain,
Yeah.
and it'll be cast into the sea.
Mm-hmm.
And this mountain we said was Herodium.
Herodium. Yeah.
Where
the mountain that King Herod had built so he could be, or his house would be the highest spot in town.
That's right.
And Jesus points directly to that high place.
That man-made mountain.
Right.
Yeah. And then what else do we get? We get this question. They come questioning Jesus.
Right.
Where'd you get this shmikah?
Yeah. Where did you get your authority? From whom did you get your? And he asked them a question.
What was his question in return?
about the baptism of John.
Yeah, the baptism of John.
John the Baptist.
Yes, was his authority or his baptism, was it
Of men?
of man or was it of God?
Of heaven, yeah.
Yeah, of heaven.
Yeah.
What
they
say?
couldn't answer him because they say if we say it's from heaven, then we're looking bad one way. If we say it's of man, then the people.
Yeah. So they couldn't say it's from God because then the question is, well, why'd you reject him?
Yeah.
We can't say of man because these people hail him to be a prophet.
Yeah.
So what are we supposed to do?
So they're really confused at that point.
Yeah.
So he said, then I won't tell you from where I get my authority.
So I'm not going to tell you. So then we get this two sons and the tenants. We get these two parables that tell a similar message.
Right. He asked, the father asked one son to go and work in the fields, and his son says, nope, not going to do it. Mm-hmm. But later repents and goes and does it.
Right.
The second son
says, oh, yeah, I'm on my way.
On my way, but he never goes.
So which one was faithful?
The first son.
They said the first son. Yeah. And then he says this story about the tenants. He leases out this field.
Right.
And he shows up to collect his harvest, or he sends his servants, and they killed him. Right. Send another set of servants, and then they treated them poorly and killed them too. And then sends his son. They killed the son.
Yeah.
And they're like, what should be done with them? Right? He sent other servants. Finally, he sent his son to them, verse 37 of Matthew 21, saying, they will respect my son. But when the tenants saw the son,
they seize him and kill him.
They said to themselves, this is the heir out of the vineyard. And he killed. Wait.
This is when the husbandmen or the
let us kill him and have his inheritance. And they took him and threw him out of the vineyard and killed him. When therefore the owner of the vineyard comes, what will he do to these tenants? They said to him, he will put these wretches to a miserable death and let out the vineyard to other tenants who will give him the fruits of their season in their seasons. Rosie's out and cleaning up. Hold on, I'll get her put up. Yeah, hold on.
Our automatic cleaning crew is on the job.
Good night, Rosie.
There she goes.
So he says, when the owner of the vineyard comes, what will he do to those tenants? And how did the priest respond? This is about where we left off last week or a couple weeks ago. What do the tenants say in verse, or what do the Sadducees say in verse 41?
They said unto him, he will miserably, the husband or the owner will miserably destroy those wicked men and will kick them out of his vineyard, and then he will rent it or lease it to other tenants who will render him the fruits of their season. And then Jesus has a long quote here. And he asked I guess he's speaking to the Sadducees at this time.
Yes.
And he says, did you never read in the scriptures, the stone which the builders rejected, the same has become the head of the corner, or the cornerstone. This is the Lord's doing, and it is marvelous in our eyes.
So this is a statement that is repeated in 2 Peter chapter 2. 2 Peter chapter 2. 1 Peter chapter 2. Ah, man.
Get back there. Ah. Need to get my older Bible that has all those books tabbed up.
Yeah, 1 Peter chapter 2. It's repeated by Peter in 1 Peter chapter 2. I knew that. I just let myself talk myself out of it. And what is happening here? Who do the priests and Sadducees think Jesus is talking about when he's talking about the tenants?
I don't know.
So to me, when we read this story, who is Jesus talking about? He's talking about the tenants, or he's talking about the or he's talking about the two sons. Who's he talking about?
Tell me. It's been a while.
He's talking about the priests. The priests are unaware that he's talking about them and to them. They think he's just talking.
Is he talking about the Sadducees and Pharisees in kind of like, I don't want out of context, but they don't understand that he's talking about them.
Right. He asked them, what's he going to do with those people who took care of the land and killed them? And they're like, oh, he's gonna kill those wretches and toss them out and let new people in.
So they don't realize they're talking about themselves.
Yeah, when they hear it, they see Rome as the tenants.
Okay.
Who are taking advantage of these people and beating them and killing them and tossing them out and not letting them have space. And they see it as, well, what should he do with them? Well, he should destroy those wretches, throw them out and kill them, and put the rightful heir back in place. Because that's what they see themselves as. And Jesus says, therefore I tell you, the kingdom of God will be taken away from you and given to a people producing its fruits. And the people who fall on this stone will be broken to pieces, and when it falls on anyone, it will crush him.
He's talking about himself at that point.
Yeah. Verse 45 says, when the chief priests and the Pharisees heard his parables, they perceived that he was speaking about them. So he got to the end there and they said, oh no, he's talking about us.
Because we didn't do our job.
And they are so locked in, they're like, well, according to this guy, we're not doing our job. What are we supposed to do now? And verse 46 says, and although they were seeking to arrest him, they feared the crowds because they held him to be a prophet. So they're in a tough spot. They want to arrest this guy because he's speaking ill of them. But who is there? Where is their power? Who is there that can stand against this prophet of God? That's what their concern is.
Well, if they're afraid of the people.
Yes.
They realize again that there's nothing they can do unless they get rid of this.
Yeah.
Man, so they're starting to plot against him. But at that point, well, we know the rest of the story. But they know that this is This is their time to plot against him.
Now they have a problem. They're struggling with this, and Jesus is like, "Oh, I got another story for you." And they say, "Okay,
But they hate it when he speaks in parables anyway,
yes."
because they can't answer the question that always comes at the end.
Mm-hmm. And so, verse 1 of chapter 22 says, "And again Jesus spoke to them in parables, saying, the kingdom of heaven can be compared to a king who gave a wedding feast." The king who gave a wedding feast. The wedding feast was for his son.
Right.
And he sent his servants to call those who were invited to the wedding feast.
Yeah. Send out invitations.
But they wouldn't come. Again, he sent other servants, saying, "Tell those who are invited, see, I have prepared my dinner, my oxen and my fat calves have been slaughtered, and everything is ready. Come to the wedding feast. Come to the party. Fill this place up. I invited you a long time ago. I said, hold the date, save the date. Didn't tell you exactly when it was happening, but I told you we were getting ready for a wedding. I got everything ready. My son went and got a bride and brought her home. And what are we supposed to do now?"
Well, everyone starts making excuses at this point.
Yes. Come to the wedding feast. But they paid no attention and went off, one to his farm, another to his business. And while the rest seized his servants and treated them shamefully, and they killed him.
Yeah.
And the king was angry. He sent his troops and destroyed those murderers and burned their city. Jesus is pretty focused on something going on here.
Right.
Something's going to get burnt and destroyed.
Right.
And if we're listening, Jesus is pretty focused on something being destroyed, broke down, and nothing left on top of itself.
Right. The temple.
The temple. It's going to be destroyed. So if that's being destroyed, what would that make the siblings, the sons, the ones who are in charge of the house?
That would make them be the ones that get killed or destroyed or burned up.
So it seems as though the judgment is coming for the sons, right?
Right. The Pharisees and Sadducees and all those that work in the temple.
So then he said to his servants, the wedding feast is ready, but those invited were not worthy. So go therefore to the main roads and invite to the wedding feast as many as have food. Oh, as many as you find. Sorry.
Yeah.
I don't know where I got that. As many as you find. And those servants went out into the roads and gathered all whom they found, both bad and good. So the wedding hall was filled with guests.
So that means that the king is inviting to the wedding.
Yes.
The unclean.
Yep.
He's inviting to the ones that are outside the promise.
Yep.
He's invited those mamzers who were worth in the promise but didn't get included because they were lesser than. Foreigners, Gentiles. Ooh,
yes.
That's the big thing.
What's interesting to me is like the kingdom of heaven is like a party.
Yeah.
This party has official invitations. Firstborns, next of kin, people in the inheritance, they all got first crack at this thing.
Yeah, they
They
had a
got an
chance.
invitation. What'd they do to it?
They did well. They
What'd
just
they do
said
with their invitation?
they rejected it.
They rejected it. They ignored it. They pretended that it did not exist.
Well, and that's been their problem for the longest time, is that they don't believe that he is the Messiah. They don't recognize him as the coming king. They just recognize him as a prophet, barely.
Yeah. So they just ignore the party. Yeah. He's trying to get the Sadducees to wake up. And he's like, "Yeah, he's talking about us." And then he tells this story about a party and they're like, "Oh, he's saying we rejected God." And he's saying that God is going to destroy us. Yes, it hasn't been enough to do what's right. And the challenge is, like, if the kingdom of God is like a party, like this says that it is, this wedding feast, the challenge is the party's not happening at the right time. It's not convenient
Not convenient for
their guests, for the righteous guests,
right.
for those who are holy and experienced and blessed, and
And
it's not doesn't fit into exactly what they're asking for and what they expect. So they sit on the sidelines. And Jesus says, the Father looks at all this emptiness and all this rejection and says, "Well, where is everybody? They've ignored you. They've even killed or maimed or treated poorly your servants who went to speak to them about your wedding feast." He said, "We'll take care of that. We'll just kill them and run them off." Well, what are we going to do then? Go and find everybody you can. Just like you said, the outsiders, the sick, the lame, the wanderers, they all need space here.
yeah.
They all need access to this.
Well, they're all welcome because we know that they're going to enjoy the party.
They're all welcome. And it's an interesting concept because we've had this conversation over the last few weeks in service, I feel like, in on Sundays. But here we are again, Jesus saying, I don't care who you are. No. That's right. It's not going to be convenient for the outcast and the. That's right. They're going to have to give up plans. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, and it's interesting. God's invitation for this and this celebration, this feast, it's not happening at the right place. It's not the right or convenient time. And
Well,
and according to Jewish tradition, it's not even being done the right way.
yeah, because there has to be a bride that we can see. There has to be a yeah.
Yeah.
I've noticed also. I have to think about when you invite someone through a conversation
Yeah.
to understand why you're presenting Jesus in such a way,
Yeah.
even though they've had experience, they've heard of Jesus, they've been to church, they look at themselves and say, I'm not ready,
Right.
I'm not prepared, or I'm not worthy.
Speaking of not being prepared and not worthy, So far in this particular story, we would think, well, the kingdom of heaven's like a party and everybody's invited. Everybody gets in.
Mm-hmm. Why would you reject that? This party is fun.
But when the king came in to look at the guests, he saw there was a man who had no wedding garment. And he said to him, "Friend, how did you get in here without a wedding garment?" And he was speechless. And then the king said to the attendants, "Bind him hand and foot and cast him into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. For many are called, but few are chosen."
A confusing statement.
So I guess we got to change clothes when we get there.
We have to change a lot of things. We have to change our habit.
I guess the call to come to the wedding feast means you got to put off some old things,
right,
and put on the new things.
Right.
You have to go from being unprepared and unaware and uninvited to when the invitation comes and you accept and you walk through the door, it's time to get some things in order.
Right.
Seems as though this is what God has called us to all along.
Right. Well, he said, in the word repent,
Yeah.
that you change your ways, you turn around and you walk away from those things that have bound you to this earth.
And it seems tough too because it's hard.
Oh yeah.
It's a hard truth of like, am I giving up the things I need to give up? Am I surrendering the way that I need to surrender to allow God to lead and build? And so I want to close tonight with a few questions for us to have a conversation about. And we'll pick up from here moving forward on this Peshat level reading. A couple questions that I have that we should ask ourselves. Am I so insistent? Am I so focused and insistent that God should throw the party or throw a party or have a celebration that I want him to? This is tough for me.
You mean the party's got to be
so
in your idea, or
the way? All right. So this is challenging to me because Chelsea and I have had this conversation multiple times. Am I so focused and insistent that the party and the celebration has to go the way that I want it to go and be at the time that I want it to be and the way that I want it to be, that I'm missing God?
I'd have to ask you, say, where's your focus?
Right. Am I the righteous one who has an expectation of God to do certain things a certain way, especially when it comes to his celebrations? And am I holding myself and others back by expecting that thing and not giving space to God to take care of God things and just respond when he calls? Does that make sense? Because the people who were invited first were righteous ones, right? They were the firstborns. They were the ones who were rightful. They were
Well, they were the ones heirs to the promise.
Heirs to the promise. They were invited first.
Yeah. As they had been from the beginning.
As they had been from the beginning. Is it possible that I have grown into kind of the identity of one of those firstborn who deserve to be invited, and that when I get invited, I can reject God and I overlook God? Am I so focused on it being the way that I want it to be, whether it be his party or his visitation, that it has to be my way, that I'm missing God entirely? The second question is, am I blinded by the fact that God's definition of a party is different from mine?
Well, let's replace party with lifestyle.
Yeah. Is God's expectation of me,
This is how he wants you to live,
yeah,
by
is
following him
is
in
the
in total faith.
yeah.
Well, okay,
So when he calls and sends an invitation to come through the
well,
Holy Spirit, it should be my responsibility to come, show
well,
up.
what happened to James and John?
Yeah,
They turned and went. They left
yeah.
without question. They
Yeah.
just followed.
Follow me.
That's
Yeah.
what God expects of you.
Yes.
So if you ask yourself, am I blinded by that? Then just simply look back at what the first disciples did.
Yeah. Am I closer to the disciples of Mark chapter 9, where Jesus says, "Come follow me," and they say, "Well, first let me tell my parents goodbye."
Yeah. I just bought a new yoke of oxen. I got to go tend to them.
Yeah.
I have other things to do, but yeah, I'll be there in a while.
Yeah, just hold that. I'll be right there. Let me finish this first.
Yeah.
It drives me crazy as dad. Probably shouldn't as much, but it does. It does. Like, I'll say, "Hey, this needs to be taken care of." Well, I've got to do this first. Okay, that wasn't the like. Take care of this. Yeah, I can vouch for that. I can vouch.
Your boys were right in line, right?
I can vouch for that. Never happened. Never happened.
But Dad,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I it happens with my kids, but it happens at school all the time. Um, all the time happens at school. If you work if you work with young people, in groups of young people, and someone does something and you're like, "Okay, hey, let's not do that." Overwhelmingly, their response isn't yes sir, no sir, yes ma'am, no ma'am. There's no apology in it. Almost every time without fail, it is, "Well, what about so and so? They're doing the same thing." I deal with this a lot because I have in school suspension kids. So I have a couple of boys right now that were in a fight in the parking lot, and so I have both of them in the same room, which is a great idea. But they've made up. They're not unfriendly to one another, and they're older, so they're not holding a grudge or anything. So that's nice. But I also have a student who, with the new cell phone policy, uh, the first time you get caught having your phone's supposed to be in your locker for high schoolers and for junior high kids. High schoolers are supposed to have access to their locker and to their phone during passing periods, and they can have their phone during lunch. They're not supposed to have it during class. But they think that's inconvenient to have to go to their locker for their phone, so they just keep their phone on them. So then when you keep your phone on you and somebody sends a message, or a parent or a person who's at home sends a message that you should be getting between classes and your phone goes off, and you pull your phone out and a teacher says, "Hey, you're not supposed to have your phone. Bring it to me." So the first offense in high school they're supposed to get, can you help me with that? Is it supposed to go to the office? So the first offense, it goes to the office. The second offense is detention. Is that right? The third offense is 1 day of in-school suspension. The fourth offense This isn't the fourth time you had your phone. This is the fourth time you've gotten caught with your phone in a place that it wasn't supposed to be, which is in class. The fourth time is 3 days of ISS. This young lady who's with me right now that started today, it's her fourth offense. And you know what she tells me? I think it's just crazy because I'm the only student that she's picking on. All these other people have their phones too.
Her friends in her classes who
That's what she
didn't
said.
get a message, didn't get a phone call, they still had their phones.
That's what she's trying to say.
She's saying, I'm going to rat them out, but they didn't get caught.
Well, realistically, her defense isn't trying to rat them out. Her defense is, well, they're not getting in trouble. I shouldn't get in trouble either.
Yeah, but she got caught.
And I think realistically, yes, agreed. And for us as children of God, with the invitation of God to come to his feast, to come to his celebration, to come and follow him, rejecting him and being unwilling to follow because, well, so-and-so didn't do it, and they say that they're a Christian, is that a good defense of?
No, but it's
Absolutely not, right?
it's a poor defense because you're not only rejecting God, but you're also saying I should be able to do what they do.
Yeah.
No, that's not what God.
But
God,
what's the measure of, and then it takes us back to, well, what's the measure of righteousness? Am I the measure of righteousness, or is Jesus the measure of righteousness? Am I the measure of righteousness, and what's acceptable? Is my life what is the measure of whether it's right or wrong, or is it God and his word?
His word.
It's got to be his word.
Right.
And his word that comes out of his mouth that says, come and follow me. And we say, well, just hold on just a second. I need to go ahead and bury my father.
Yeah.
He's like, let the dead bury their own dead. And he moves on.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, I'm inviting you to a party. I'm inviting you to a celebration day after day after day. If you'll just trust in what I have. Well, I'm not going to be able to make what I need to make from this field. I've got to take care of this plan and this. But I told you to come and trust in me. My table has more than enough. The feast has more than enough for what you need, right?
Right.
So are we blinded by the fact that God's definition of a party is different from ours?
Yes.
God's definition of provision is different from ours. Another question, the last question. Am I so distracted by the worries of this world, the worries of this life, or even my personal agenda and what I want to accomplish, or the idolatry of myself and what I want and what I feel like I deserve? Am I so distracted by those things that I don't even hear the invitation of God? Am I so distracted by the busyness of my life that I don't even understand the invitation of the presence of God in my life? And so I guess the overarching real question is, am I ready for the party?
Yeah. Well, I've seen it myself in church where a lot of people come on a Sunday.
Yeah.
With the idea, well, I'll give God this hour and a half, but I've got really important things to do. So if the importance of the thing that I have to do is supersedes my time with God, then I'm going to go do that thing. And we saw this Sunday after Sunday, especially during football season.
Yep.
Is that, well, kickoff is at noon, and they're not going to be finished until noon. So, well, I'll give God 2 hours next week,
Yeah,
unless the kickoff is at 1 o'clock. Then he's only getting an hour.
yeah.
And I saw this time, and you could look
I used to
through
listen
the
to a pastor that was in that area, and
you
he
could look
said,
in the audience and see certain seats that have been normally filled with this
Mhm.
same Christian who is,
Yeah.
because he has season tickets, he's not there today.
Well, so I've talked to, so I'll give you a couple of examples. Um, I used to listen to a pastor all the time who's in the Dallas Fort Worth metro area, and in the fall, especially when the Cowboys were playing noon games,
Mm-hmm.
their Saturday service would be really full,
Oh yeah.
way more full than normal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, happens all the time.
In Oklahoma City, there are several churches who do multiple services. They do Saturday and early. So during baseball season in the late spring and early summer, when baseball tournaments are in full swing, their Saturday evening services are more full because kids are playing pool play on Saturday morning and they're free Saturday evening. But then they start playing elimination games and double elimination tournaments at like 9 or 10 in the morning on Sundays.
Yeah.
We used to we had when we were in Oklahoma City and had multiple services. Nick was on a little league baseball team, and their coach was a good guy, and I helped coach, but we were also on staff at a church, and we'd get done with first service and get Nick dressed for baseball. And the other coach would come by and get him. So he's been to service. Nick has been to service, and he'd leave, go with Scott, and they'd go to the ball field. And when we got done, we'd go meet up with them and finish coaching the evening. But I mean, it was, I don't know, once or twice a month in the months of May and June, April, May, and June. And it was like, if you want to take up your time, if you want to commit your time to anything, um, you can do it
Yeah.
pretty easily.
Well, you can see that, and I know that happens with kids baseball and stuff like that, but you can clearly see where adults,
Yeah,
they have their priorities set, and church is an after effect.
yeah.
I don't really need that. I've already
Well, with
pledged God. I already.
bivocational farmers, it makes it easy. Like bivocational ranchers,
Mm-hmm.
so like ranchers who have a job and also ranch and take Saturdays and Sundays when they're not working their 9 to 5 job. Like especially when you get through the summer, most guys they get off their job on Friday, whatever time they get off, and when it's hay season, they're cutting as much as they can Friday night and into Saturday morning, turning stuff over early Sunday morning, and baling as much as they can and getting it picked up and off the if it's square bales, getting it picked up and off the ground by the end. So they have heavy weekends
Right.
cutting and baling hay through June and July because that's the time they have.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, you're limited. I'm not talking about
yeah,
the
but
Bible.
I'm just saying. But at the same time, they're that's a season where they're skipping out on church
Yeah.
because they're committed to something else. Something else is a priority. And again, the question is, am I blinded by my ambition or my personal agenda or my whatever, what I want to accomplish? Is it so strong that I don't even hear the invitation of God? Or I can't hear the invitation of God because I've got so much in my head, so much that I say, I've got to get this done, that God isn't even on the radar. You know?
Yeah. Well, I understand the bivocational aspect of that. It's got to be done because this is the season of harvest.
Sure.
This is the my livelihood. But I'm talking about the people that are uh, their 9 to 5 Monday through Friday, their weekends are for enjoyment, or their weekends are for something other than
Sure.
money making,
Yeah.
or they don't have a critical thing like, I don't have to do this on Saturday or Sunday.
Yeah.
They forget about church completely if church interferes with their enjoyment time, their
Sure.
sports addiction, or their whatever. And that's that. Those are the people that I say, okay, that's hypocritical.
Sure.
If you've pledged yourself to God by making a commitment to Christ, then follow through with that commitment, even if it's only on Sunday, because we know
Sure.
the earning the living Monday through Friday is important. But when you put God in second place because you've got to go to a sporting event
Sure.
that you don't have to attend.
Well, and it's an interesting conversation too, because like conversation that Nick and I have had um, over and over again, even now, like who is your provider? Like, how are you provided for? What does that look like? And he was listening to a preacher. He went to a men's conference a couple weeks ago, last week, last week, and he was there and really went through this process and was praying and in a service, and they said, pastor said, been doing things a long time, and God said, hey, I have this for you. And he said, God, I just don't know how I can afford that. And the man said, as clear as I'm talking to you, God said, I didn't tell you you needed to afford it. I told you you needed to trust me and follow me and let me take care of it. And so he said, okay. And he just pushed towards what God had for him in that direction and had to trust God that whatever God was trying to do was beyond his own ability, outside of what he could do in his own right or figure out how to plan in his own ability and his own strength and his own finances. God said, I'm calling you, I'm asking you to trust me and to follow me. Yeah. And I think that's applicable right here. Is it God, you've got a calling in my life and I've got to figure out how to make that happen? Or is it God, you've placed a calling on my life, so I'm going to press in that direction and trust you and move and and function in that direction? And if I do, is it possible that there's a hundredfold harvest like Isaac in the same year? Because of what God did, not because of what I did. Not because I did something supernatural or amazing or incredible, but God, in his omnipotence and his ability, provided a hundredfold.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. Do you think that it would only take one time for a person to hear the clear, quiet voice of God and follow through? It would only take one time, one experience to say, the next time I hear his voice, I'm going to feel super confident because that's all I have to do is follow that voice, follow that command, follow that thing. It would take one
Sure.
time. I think that's what a lot of people are not trusting,
Yeah.
because if they hear something and say, well, and then they cast their own doubt into it,
Yeah.
if they would just follow through with that voice and say, I'll take care of it, and then follow through,
Yeah.
it would only take one experience.
Yeah. It's
Well,
very rare
that's
that
what
we
I'm saying.
do it that way. Yeah. It's always, yeah. Yeah. I don't want to have to do that again. Yeah.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
is right.
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm. It's tough. It's tough. Man, Dan Betzer is a great example in his young ministry life um, of just trusting God and seeing God do miraculous. However controversial or not controversial it is, Robert Morris is another one. Do we still have that book from Robert Morris, Chelsea? It was a great book, but there's a lot of examples of men, of leaders, of even and women. Christine Kane is a great example, just to remain faithful when other people were just not. People said, "I trust God and I'm going to follow Him," and then they look around a few years later and they're not there where they said they were going to be forever. And she went from being a youth leader to being like a student leader to being an adult leader to being a person who prays with people to being a person who shared her testimony one time to being a person who is involved in receiving donations and has a charitable organization that works to rescue women out of sex trafficking all over the world. And just because she trusted God enough just to be where He told her to be. And when somebody came to her and said, "Hey, I think you should share your testimony," she was like, "I think you're talking to the wrong person." They said, "No, no, no, you can do it." I don't know if that's a good idea. To now she gets paid to go and speak all around the world so she can raise money and do work to rescue women out of prostitution and sex trafficking. She wants to rescue women and give them hope and share the gospel with people who are hurt. And I promise it's not an easy thing every day. I know we look at people who are on TV or have these big organizations and they're like, those people are really doing something. Billy Graham speaking all over his life. That man had hardship and challenge. He got rejected and people said no and people left saying that he was full of hooey. But he was faithful. Never ran the other direction. Same thing's true with Dan Betzer. Dan Betzer, as a young pastor, owed money on a car and had made a promise, had made a faith promise to God that he was going to give a certain amount of money to missions. And he said, the only way this is going to happen is if I can sell this car. So he went to the bank and he said, "Hey, I've made this," he said, "I've made this faith promise and I need to sell my car, but I'm not going to be able to give you the money for my car. The money for my cars that I sell is going to go to missions." And they said, "Oh, that's not a problem at all." What? "Oh yeah, we'll let you sell the car. We'll even give you a release of lien. We'll just keep the loan and you can keep paying on it until the loan's paid. We won't even change the terms or anything." He's like, "So I got the option of paying for a car that I wasn't about to own anymore." Said, "So I was going to keep making payments for 2 more years on a car that I had just bought, but I was selling because that's what God called me to do." He said, "So I said, I know how to do this." I said, "I'll put a price in this classified ad that only an idiot will pay for." I said, "I put a price on that car, put that classified ad in, and 3 days later, that idiot was driving away in my car, having paid the price that I asked for." And I gave that money to missions. And he said, "I shared this story a year later at my next missions commitment or missions banquet. and had lunch with a deacon in my church, and we sat down for lunch at their house, and just got done with lunch, and he threw some keys across the table at me.
I'm the idiot.
He said, what's this? He said, my wife and I have been praying, and God's been telling me I've been needing to give you this car for 6 months, and I've been telling him he's crazy and haven't been listening. He said, and then you had to go and share that story about selling your car and giving that money to missions. And he said, and it just confirmed that I'm supposed to give you this stupid car. He said, what? He said, yeah. About the time that God called you to sell your car and keep making payments on a car you didn't own, God was telling me that I needed to gift you my car. And I said, why would I give him a car? He already has a car. And then you sold your car, and I thought, that's strange. And then you share that story of why you sold your car, and it just confirmed that I was supposed to have given you this car a long time ago. I need you to forgive me for not giving you this car like God called me to, and you having to go without because I wasn't listening to what God had to say, but you were. And again, it's who is responsible, who is in control, who is the provider. And are we so consumed with what we have to do that we're missing the voice of God?
Yeah.
And so,
all good questions.
so it's just a great, it's a great thing. We need to have this conversation. We need to have this, these ideas because, again, at the end of the story, there's a person who's there and was invited to be there after the fact that wasn't dressed for the party and gets tossed out into the darkness. And so, this is where we're at.
That's right.
So, join us
Well,
next week
yeah, we should be here next week.
when we move on from this party.
All right. Good night.
Good night.